Welcome to Conversation 3. How would you answer the question, what is the Old Testament? Pause this video, talk as a family, and come back after you've answered. Did your answer sound like this? The Old Testament is 39 books containing God's promises, covenant laws, and guidance for ancient Israel through the nation's history. It serves as a teacher to lead us to recognize our need for a Messiah. Now let's break this down just a little bit. The Old Testament is 39 books. Does the number of books in the Bible matter? Well, the short answer is yes, absolutely it does. Too often throughout history, different groups have tried to add or subtract from what God has providentially created to be His Word to us. Later on, we will discuss how these books were revealed to be His divine Word, but for now, suffice it to say that God has purposefully put the collection together. In these 39 books, we find the history of God working throughout the world since the beginning of time. Prophecies of salvation, wisdom and poetry that surpass human understanding, and God revealing His moral character to us through His law. The Old Testament is 39 books containing God's promises. God made a lot of promises in the Old Testament. For example, God promised that Abraham would be the father of nations, that he would give the Israelites a promised land, and that David's kingdom would last forever. That a Messiah would come in, rescue them from their biggest enemies, and that Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, and even further, that Messiah would die for our sins. God made a lot of promises in the Old Testament, and He kept them all, although it did take some of them many, many years. The Old Testament is 39 books containing God's promises, covenant laws. God entered into a covenant that's also known as a testament, a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge for you, with ancient Israel. What's a covenant? A covenant is a sacred promise, a lot like a wedding, where a husband and a wife promise that they will never leave nor forsake each other, that they will stick with each other forever. In this covenant with Israel, God gave the people laws and commandments to follow. He promised that if they kept these commandments and honor His ways, they would be His treasured people. God never breaks His covenants. He honors this promise. That is why His laws are not just rules for us to follow, they are a standard of relationship. Many look at the Bible, see God's laws, and think that they are just checking a list off, that they must complete these. Instead, what we see and what we know is that they are God revealing His character and morals to us. The Old Testament is 39 books containing God's promises, covenant laws, and guidance for ancient Israel throughout history. In the Old Testament, God instructed His people how to live. He gave them guidance on many things, like how to stay healthy, how they should interact with other nations, and how to live righteously. Let's look at what Psalm 25, 8 through 10 has to say. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore He instructs sinners in His ways. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them His ways. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful towards those who keep the demands of the covenant. Like a good teacher, God does not hand out a worksheet to the students and say, good luck. He spends time helping each of us grow in our understanding, so that what is written on the page is more to us than just words written in ink. They are promises and they are relationship. God has taught us throughout history because he cares for us. The Old Testament is 39 books containing God's promises, covenant laws, and guidance for ancient Israel throughout its history. It serves as a teacher to lead us to recognize our need for a coming Messiah. In Galatians 3:24 through 25, we are told that the Old Testament law was a tutor or a type of teacher to lead us to Christ. Now, if you know what a tutor is, you know that a tutor is someone who works with a student one-on-one. The Old Testament wasn't just a teacher for ancient Israel, it's also a very important tutor for us. The Old Testament taught the Israelites how much they need a Messiah, and it teaches us that very same truth. In the Old Testament, God promised that a Messiah would come and save people from their biggest enemies. Our deepest enemies are sin and death. And Jesus saved us from both. So one more time, how would you answer the question, what is the Old Testament? Well, as we answer together, we know that the Old Testament is 39 books containing God's promises, covenant law, and guidance for Israel throughout its history. It serves as a teacher to lead us to recognize our need for a Messiah. Now, at this time, this video will close, and you will open up your Continuing the Conversation handout and work through it together as a family. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.